who's going to go number one this year, Joe? I mean, there's so many different conversations going on, right? You got the Cleveland Guardians, number one pick for the first time in franchise history. They got a lot of money to play with. I believe, is that 18 million they got to play with this year, somewhere around there?
It's
That's
quite a
stack of cash they got. The slot value for the number one pick right around 10.5 million, which is really high. I still remember going back not too long ago, if a guy was asking for $10 million as the first round pick, like, whoa, that's a decent amount. But now that's the slot value. There's so many different ways the Guardians could go here. Thinking of just the Guardians as an organization, they've done underslot picks with their first round picks over the last few years, but this is a different scenario here where they're number one. So what do you think here? Do you think they're going to go with the best player available? Do you think they'll go with something major underslot, or maybe something in between where they get one of these high ranking players, but try to save a little bit of money as well?
Yeah, I think it's a tough question. I think there's two ends of the spectrum. On one end, I think Cleveland is the type of organization that's always going to try and save money with their first round pick in an effort to spread the wealth and get as many good players as they possibly can. But this is a below average draft after the first round. There's a pretty significant fall off. And so when you take that into consideration and you take into consideration, you have to ask, like, what are you saving your money for? Because of that, I kind of think Cleveland is just going to go chalk. I mean, there's been a lot of rumors about JJ Weatherholt for $9 million, and I've heard those same rumors, but I think they're going to be able to strike a deal with Travis Bazzana. I think he's going to probably go for about 9.3, 9.4. It has to be more than what Paul Skeens got last year. The agent has to set that precedent. I don't think there's any doubt about that. But I would be surprised if Travis Bazzana and his representation walked away from the ability to be the number one pick, even if they take a $1 million haircut to do it.
Yeah, and that's another thing I think people are starting to get a bit more used to is the baseball draft, the Major League Baseball draft. It's a different cat when it comes to other sports, right? NFL, NBA, you just go that best player, right? But with baseball, it's so different. You have the slot values. You have these negotiations going on where, guys can, team sees a player maybe similar when it comes to the skill set, but they're projected to go lower. Maybe we can do a deal for that guy, right? We don't have to go with that higher end talent that's trying to get more money. So it's very interesting. But yeah, a couple of weeks ago, I'm thinking, Guardians, kind of the way they are. They got another pick as a competitive balance pick not too long after. Yeah, sounds like maybe they can go with an underslot. Maybe they could do a JJ Weatherholt, a Chase Burns. I believe you had him mocked at number one in one of your mock drafts. But the more I think about it, Travis Bazzana, probably his next home. Yeah, he could go to the Reds, but they got a ton of infielders there. Rockies, they have such a hard time with drafting pitching or, acquiring pitching just in general. So, maybe they could go with a pitcher there. So it feels like the next spot could be Oakland, and that slot value is, I believe, a little bit below 8.5 million. So Bazzana, it's kind of like, well, if you don't go number one, you're probably going to get around that 8 million. So the Guardians, like you said, 9.3, 9.5, you're still going to get yourself a pretty good chunk of change, and you're still going to save yourself a little bit of money. So yeah, I think that's the way we're going to go.
I think you're right. Yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah,
I have a hard time finding a home for Bazzana before Oakland. And so if that's the case, you have to be pragmatic about how you're going to attack this thing if you're his agency.
And it's also, we've also heard the old saying, you don't draft for need, right? You take the best player, right? But kind of what we were talking about coming into this, where it feels like these players are just so advanced now, and someone like Bazzana, it's almost like you're getting a prospect that you're going to see it maybe even in a year, year and a half. You see how quick these guys are coming up. The guys at the top of the draft, not even just Paul Skeens, there's other guys too. And Paul Skeens is just named an all-star, for crying out loud. So you're starting to see how advanced these guys are. So that's why I say, in the Reds situation, they already got so many guys there. So, what do you do if you take Bazzana? What do you do with McLean? What do you do there? So it's interesting. So now, if you go Bazana at number one, do you think this can end up shaking up the rest of the top 10? Do you think that we could end up getting a pretty straightforward top 10 overall because they just go chalk there? Or do you think we could see some other teams, maybe, for instance, Oakland, maybe they're thinking they end up getting Bazana, and maybe other teams, maybe you're trying to plan things out. Basically what I'm trying to ask, do you see a chaotic first round or the first top 10 or the top 10 picks, or do you think it's going to be pretty straightforward overall?
I really think there's two paths to this. On one hand, if Bazana goes number one, I would think that the order would be something like Bazana 1, Chase Burns 2, Condon 3. I think Kurtz would then go to Oakland. I think they really like him. And then I think Weatherholt probably goes to Chicago, the White Sox. I think that would be a good landing spot for him. That'd be a good value. And then, I've had Bryce Rayner to the Royals for a while now. The flip side of that is if Weatherholt goes number one, then it's Weatherholt at 1. I still think it's Burns 2. I just really think the Reds are in on Burns. But I also think I think he's a dark horse, like I said, for Cleveland. With 3, it's either Condon or Caglianone, we would think. And then with Bazana still on the board, he would go 4, of course. With 5, I think that would have to be Conor Griffin or someone like that. And then again, Bryce Rayner goes 6. But listen, nobody ever gets these right, and that's my with the people that I've been talking to, it's my best guess.
Yeah, and like I'm not a scout or an evaluator or any bit close to anything expertise when it comes to those, that subject matter. But, I think what this all does, the mock drafts, and, even just predictions on like free agency and trades or whatever else, the most important thing I think at the end of the day is it opens up conversation, right? It gets people thinking, and that's why I like seeing all these mock drafts. I like seeing the reasoning behind it. I like your mock drafts and other platforms as well, because you guys provide a lot of detail, right? You're not just throwing stuff out there, right? It's interesting. You brought up the Royals, right? And someone like Bryce Rayner, where to me this year, he feels like that Marcelo Meyer, Jordan Lawler type, where this is a guy that has a good amount of projection. Where with the Royals, when it comes to having someone like Bobby Witt Jr. for years to come, and again, you don't draft for need, but do you see maybe that coming into play a little bit with that kind of a scenario with the Royals?
Not even a little bit. At the end of the day, you draft explicitly for value. Like if you think he could be, if you have a top 10 prospect shortstop at AAA and you have a 25-year-old Bobby Witt Jr. in the big leagues in 2026, you've got a pretty good problem, because then you can just flip Bryce Rayner for, literally anything you want. Like look at what the Orioles have right now with Kobe Mayo. They can go get whoever they want at the trade deadline if they're willing to move a guy like Kobe Mayo. So if you truly believe, and your player development system believes as well, that Bryce Rayner is the top prospect who is going to have the most value at the 6th pick, it doesn't matter if you got Bobby Witt Jr. as a superstar 17-year-old in the big leagues. You just take the best player available without question.
Yeah. And, looking at Rayner, he looks like the real deal, man. Like he really reminds me of Marcelo Meyer, really kind of gives you that sort of same profile. Good hit, good power along with it, pretty smooth out in the field for the most part. I'm excited to see where he goes. I feel like he can be a bit of an X factor in the top 10, because it feels like there's multiple teams, according to all the mocks and the reports out there, that there's a lot of teams that like him in the top 10. Mm-hmm. So it'll be interesting to see how that goes. Now, earlier, you mentioned the Reds with Chase Burns. One popular pick for the number 2 spot has been Charlie Condon. Now, Charlie Condon, he is a really interesting, first off, a great story, right? He was a red shirt, with University of Georgia, and he just exploded. This guy it's incredible what he's done in college. Now, with Charlie Condon, that has been the popular landing spot for him in Cincinnati. If the Reds were to say, go for Chase Burns, do you see Charlie Condon being someone that could fall pretty far, or do you think a team would, quickly nab him?
I think you'd get picked up pretty quick. I think the interesting thing that happens with Condon is if Condon goes 3 to Colorado, how far does Caglione fall? Because I
Mm,
think Caglione wouldn't fit with. I don't think he would fit with Oakland at 4. With the
yeah.
White Sox, I know they have interest, but I think there's also more exceptional 5-tool talent that could be available there, like a Conor Griffin. With 6, we just talked about Rayner. With 7, we haven't talked about 7 yet, but I tend to think that the Cardinals are going to go for one of, if Bryce Rayner falls or Hagen Smith if he's available there. And then all of a sudden you get to 8 and you're like, okay, Jack Caglione is still on the board at 8. Where does it stop? Where does he land? I think that would be fascinating. It would be, for me, I think it would be very, very cool if he ended up with the Pittsburgh Pirates, a team that is searching for offensive help. I think that would be a tremendous fit.
Yeah, I mean that's another team I'm very interested in this top 10 are the Pittsburgh Pirates. I just put together my mock draft. Let's see how the heck I do with that. But the Pirates, that was one team I was just staring at my screen for like 15 minutes trying to, just weigh all these different possibilities. With Pittsburgh, I think they're a good example of when you look at a team that's just about to enter that competitive window, right? We're seeing what the Pirates are doing this year. I just mentioned Paul Skeens not too long ago. Man, that guy's incredible. But I mean, they have a lot of good players on this team, and they seem very close. And like you said, they could use some offense. Now, I will present to you where I had the 2 players with the Pirates. I was going either Braden Montgomery or James Tibbs. Now, I think this could be a good example of whether or not you take a player that could maybe be a bit of a fast riser through the minor leagues, or could you go for a situation where even though the Pirates are pretty close to that competitive window, you still shoot for upside, right? You still shoot for, maybe go for a prep player, maybe someone that is a college level, but maybe a little bit farther away, try and get a higher ceiling out of that. What do you think with the Pirates here? Do you think if you were running the show over there, do you think it would be something that makes sense to go after a guy that can rise, a bat that can really get to them quickly? Or do you think they should still just go for that best player, the one that has the highest ceiling possible?
Yeah, I definitely think going for the highest ceiling and trusting your player development is always going to be the tack that you need to do. And that could be taking a pitcher. I don't think it's out of listen, the Pirates have nailed Paul Skeens. They've nailed Jared Jones. Braxton Ashcraft is right there. Anthony Solometo is still kind of coming back from injury, but has huge stuff.
Yeah.
They've got a feel for pitching. They know how
Yeah.
to develop arms. And, anybody that looks at the Pirates is going to go, how far can this team realistically go if they can't score runs? It's the similar thing to what's happening in Seattle. Too much
Yeah.
pitching than they know what to do with. No bats.
Mm-hmm.
I think you always draft what you're good at, and if that means you think you can extract the most value out of Cam Caminiti or Trey Savage, you take that player, develop them up, and then trade them for a bat. Because I think at some point the Pirates are going to have to make the decision that, hey, we're going to have to move some of these pitching prospects to bring in some bats to help the big league team. So out of the guys that you mentioned, I would swing for the fences. I would take Braden Montgomery. I would try and go for a guy that has 30 home run potential and has an absolute howitzer in right field. But there is a little bit of safety in James Tibbs as a guy who could possibly be playing like Cole Calhoun level defense in Pittsburgh in 2025. So depends on your appetite for risk.
Yeah, that's kind of I think that's the right word, appetite. It's like, what are they feeling, right? So you got Horowitz there. He's a guy that's, he's had his experiences with the drafts, right? With the Red Sox for a while. I would say a pretty smart guy overall. This is one situation where maybe you could see the Pirates maybe try to go even for a bit of an underslot, because they do have a pick a little bit later on to where maybe they could try and save some here. Maybe they could use that savings for something else a little bit later. Do you see teams, speaking of the Pirates and underslot, Do you see teams in this top 10 really trying to go for some deals? Like, are you hearing anything about that? Or is it kind of feeling like we're just going to take a look at those rankings there and you just go chalk?
That is all anybody's doing right now. I mean, that is every phone call I've had today. Every single team is looking for a deal. Every single team is looking to shave off some of their signing bonus with some guys that they like, some college bats specifically that they like in the 1 to 20 range. You're not going to see it as much in the 1 through 10 range. There are going to be underslot deals because leverage is what it is. 1 through 5, you're going to have some guys shaving some money off the top. But every team 8 to 25 right now is trying to set up a pre-draft deal with someone where they can save a little money, feel good about the player that they have lined up on their board, and move on. And that way they have an actual plan for rounds 2, comp round A, round 3, things like that. So yeah, I mean, that's exactly what this week is about every single year. Setting a plan and trying to get the most bang for your buck. Most of the time, agents will not budge. They'll just play it out.
Yeah, it usually seems more often where you see the lower guys where maybe they could end up getting a bit more money and then they end up going a little bit higher. Do you see anyone in this draft that, if you're looking, for example, let's say you're just looking at the rankings right now, you're seeing the players 1 through 10. Do you think there's anyone maybe even in the 15, 20, maybe even a little bit lower than that, maybe even a lot lower than that? Do you think there's anyone out there that could maybe sneak into this top 10? Do you see any risers out there that could be a surprise where they announce the name and you go, whoa, kind of like Frank Mozzicato a couple of years ago with the Royals? Like, I don't know if anyone saw that one coming. And it was like, who the heck is this guy?
I can promise you, absolutely nobody saw that one coming.
Yeah. I loved it. I thought it was great. But do you see a move like that this year?
That move with Mozzicato came so far out of left field that I can't imagine anyone would ever project anything like that happening. There are some names that I've heard floated in the, we'll just call it top 10 area. Caleb Lomavita is a name that is in my, I have him at 37 right now on my big board. Cal's catcher. He has some love as an underslot guy in the top 10. I think that's a possibility. Another guy that I think has some believers up that high is Kalen Culpepper. He's the shortstop at Kansas State. I have him at 30. I think he could sneak into the top 10. And then as you get higher up the board, the guy that is just shooting like a rocket ship right now, I've currently got him. My final update will come out tomorrow. He is my he's my number 18 prospect for the class. Christian Moore, the Tennessee second baseman. I think he could go as high as 7, 8, 9, 10, anywhere in that 7 to 12 range. He just seems to be someone that people are really, really energized by right now. So those would be the 3 that I would circle. I think maybe as one more, I think Malcolm Moore could go considerably higher than he is on most boards, but we'll just have to wait and see.
Yeah, you bring up Christian Moore there. Guy had an insane College World Series, first cycle since 1956. Yeah, the power is off the charts with that guy. High energy player, has a chip on his shoulder. He plays with a bit of a swagger. And hey, you know what? Teams are always trying to look for a little extra juice. One team I have seen as a popular landing spot with him over the last couple of weeks are the Angels. I've read in a couple of different mocks. The Angels seem like this kind of enigma in this top 10 where you could really go either way. We're used to seeing the fast rising college players, just like they did with, Nolan Schanuel last year. Saw it with Reed Detmers a few years ago. Now, with the Angels, I don't know if you've necessarily heard anything or, just based off speculation, where do you think the Angels could go with this draft? Do you see them just chugging along and just sticking to the plan? Maybe Artem Moreno's yelling at him on the phone, no, you get that player that's going to be ready in the majors in the next year? Or do you think player development guys, that are really doing the work there, do you think they really shoot for something, even if it is a high school guy? What do you think?
I think the Angels are in a position as an organization right now where they need to go for stardom, they need to go for impact, they need to go for foundational pillars of an
Yeah.
organization. I look at where that
Mhm.
organization is right now, and while Zach Neto has been a good player, I don't think he's been a great player. The Nolan
Yeah.
Shanuel pick especially looks frustrating considering just how strong and deep that 2023 class was.
Mhm.
So in that respect, with Shohei Ohtani no longer an Angel, with Mike Trout just chronically hurt every single year, I think it's important that you take into consideration, hey, maybe our window is closing. Maybe the window is shut. And if that's the case, we need to be open to a Conor Griffin. We need to be open to a Bryce Rayner and trust that our player development staff is going to be able to turn them into what they need to be rather than drafting a guy like, and this is nothing against Christian Moore by any means, but rather than drafting a guy like Christian Moore, who does have hit tool concerns, who does have fielding concerns. Now, I do think the idea of Christian Moore ending up with the Angels and Ron Washington would be a beautiful marriage. I mean,
Mm.
Christian Moore, there are concerns about whether or not he can stay on the dirt. You put him with Ron Washington, I think he's in the best hands possible
Oh yeah.
to be able to refine that glove. Yeah, so I think it's a terrific fit. I don't know if I subscribe to the fastest to the major leagues philosophy that I'm sure Artie Moreno is helping to employ. But yeah, so my take on the Angels is take the best damn player available.
Yeah, yeah. For me personally, I would love to see Bryce Rayner go there. I think that would be,
Be a good fit.
California kid. I think it would just be awesome, right? That's a guy you can hope for, and down the road, right? And I agree with you. I think the Angels. I've talked about it many times on this channel, where I think the Angels just need to start over. Everything, new uniforms, just everything. They need a fresh start. We'll see. That's my hope for them. I hope they do go that high school route. You mentioned another name, right? You just brought one up there. I think is very interesting for this top 10. Conor Griffin. All right, Conor Griffin is. I've seen the word alien floated around with him. I think that's a perfect word for him. The guy's 6'4". He's as stocky as can be. He's got strength for days. He's got leverage for days with the bat. My goodness, just a generational kind of an athlete. He can play gold glove center field, gold glove shortstop, for crying out loud. My goodness, Conor Griffin, where is this guy ending up? What do you think?
I think the White Sox are the Vegas favorite right now. And now things would have to shake out for that to work. I mean, if Weatherholt goes number one, then I think there's a very high likelihood that Conor Griffin is the number 5 overall pick. If
Mhm.
Weatherholt is on the board at 5, I think Weatherholt could be the number 5 pick. But for me, it comes down to 3 teams. I think it's the White Sox, I think it's the Pirates, and I think it's the Nationals. And I don't think he gets by all 3 of those teams. Do I think the Angels make the most sense? Yeah, I mean, I think they should go for superstar upside. That is what they are currently lacking. It is what they are currently lacking in their farm system. So I think he'd be a terrific fit for the Angels. I know that they've done their research there, but I don't get the impression that they're really in on that. So I really, for me, it comes down to those 3 teams, and I think the floor is pick 10.
Yeah, I find the Nationals interesting in my mock. I did a bit of a, I'm thinking, what could be a head turning move? I got to have one head turner in this mock draft. So I actually did have Conor Griffin falling out of the top 10. I know that sounds probably crazy, but I had him landing with the Tigers. I ended up, my mock's a bit weird, but I ended up going with Braden Montgomery to the Nationals. I figured, Pirates, maybe they go for that fast riser. They go with someone like a James Tibbs, and then Braden Montgomery falls into the Nationals' laps. Conor Griffin, I think could go either way. Do you think the one concern with him has been the hit tool, where there's some timing issues there? I've heard someone say a bit of herky jerkiness to his swing. What do you think the concerns with the swing are enough to hold him back a little bit in this draft, or do you see a team thinking, "Nah, we can clean that up"?
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly some rigidity in the way that his body moves at the plate. I don't think there's any doubt about that. I don't think anybody would argue that. And the fact that he's a right-handed hitter, um, when you compare that to a guy like Rayner, who plays shortstop and is left-handed, same size,
Mhm.
Rayner gets that feather in his cap in a lot of ways. But do I think teams are gonna make that make Conor Griffin fall. Like, it depends on what you consider falling. Like, I think there's a universe where Conor Griffin falls to 13, 14, 15. I think that's a very real possibility. Teams in the draft value peace of mind. They value safety. And if there is a
Yeah.
Ryan Waldschmidt thing, if there is if Ryan Waldschmidt or Cam Smith or some of these guys fit better in an organizational philosophy, maybe they bump Conor Griffin. So we'll see. I still think the talent is just too much to pass up.
Yeah, I completely agree. I'm gonna keep my eye on him. There's definitely a lot of intrigue there, but you also, you're mentioning, talking about how he's a good player. There's another good player in this top 10. One that he's I would say he's probably my top 3 when it comes to favorite players in this draft. Nick Kurtz, right?
Okay.
Nick Kurtz, to me, I think. Yeah, he's got the first base thing. I know that's a lower value position. I know that's, something where they weigh that heavily, the positional value. But my goodness, that guy has a bat and he is massive and he has just amazing plate discipline. I really enjoy watching him when he's at the plate. Where do you think Nick Kurtz is a guy? Because I've seen a lot of mocks out there have him fall. When I say falling, I mean out of the top 10. Right, not necessarily falling 20, 30, but I've seen Nick Kurtz a lot where this was a guy people were thinking could be a top 3 pick at one point, go 6 months ago. And now I'm seeing where I've even seen him, places like 14 or 15 in the draft. What do you think? What are you hearing on Nick Kurtz with, what teams think about him? Is that positional value holding him back a little bit? What do you think?
Yeah, well, first of all, Robbie, I have to apologize. I don't think I said this off the air. I do have a hard out of the show at 9:00, so I apologize for that. So this is going to have to be my last answer.
Yeah,
but I will
absolutely.
get back with you. I will get back with you for another episode for sure.
Absolutely.
For Nick, I think the biggest thing with Nick that has people concerned was the shoulder. He separated the shoulder earlier in the year. There were some questions as to whether or not that was really bothering him and his production the rest of the year. From what I understand, his shoulder came back looking pretty good, and teams feel a lot better about it now than the narrative might have suggested a couple of weeks back. So I don't think Nick Kurtz is going to fall that far. I think he's the type of guy that we talked about Pittsburgh. Be a sensational fit for Pittsburgh. I know that they don't necessarily need a first base statue over there that can really bang, but he is the type of guy that could go as high as 4. He could fall as low as 17. It just depends on how teams value that hit tool and the first base positional value. So we'll see. I still think he goes in the top 10, but he's the one guy in all of this that there are some question marks as to where he eventually lands.
Yeah, I'm very interested in it. Really excited to see where he goes. I think it's going to be very interesting. Yeah. But Joe, man, thank you for giving us your time. I know you're a busy man these days. Of course. Real quick, before you do go, could you just let the audience know where they can find you? What do you got going on these days?
Yeah. You can find me at Joe Doyle MILB on Twitter. If you're really into the draft, you can follow my Patreon at patreon.com/overslot. It's a weekly radio podcast where I talk about rumors and smoke that I'm hearing. And then also you can find all of my work, all 615 scouting reports, and we call it a monthly mock draft over at futurestarseries.com. We'll be pushing out the last mock on Friday.
That's awesome, man. Hey, just want to say, thanks again for coming on, but thank you for all the work you do, man. You got you and, everyone else in the industry. You guys are crazy. You're crazy, but in a good way. Like, you guys do so much. So really appreciate it.
Thank you, man.
And again, thank you for coming on today. Really appreciate that. So,
all right, Robbie. Hey, be good, man. We'll see you.
Amen. You too. See you later. But alrighty, everyone, let's get to it here. So we're going to kind of go through the rest of the show here. So really quick, how do I'm on StreamYard, everyone. I got to figure out how to do this really quick. I don't usually do this very often, but everyone, while I'm figuring this out, if you can for me, hit that like button for me. If anyone else is new in the stream, if you can subscribe, if you're new, that's always helpful. But I think I might be able, let me see here. Here we go. I think okay. I can actually move myself. There we go. Okay. All right. We are good. I'm in the middle of the screen now. But let's kind of go through picks 2 through 10. So I did my mock draft. So if you haven't seen that, go check that out. And yeah, let me know what you think about it. Go tell me what you think of each of my picks. They're probably all going to be wrong, but let me know. Anyway, but right now, everyone, when it comes to we kind of just touched on the Tigers a little bit. I'm going to start with my Red Sox here, right? Cam Smith is my guy for the Red Sox, right? There's so many different bats that could happen here with the Red Sox. In my opinion, I think they need to go with something. If you're going to go with a bat, you need to go in the college ranks. You need to, I think you need to just go for the best bat available. When, sure, you got Craig Breslow there, you got him running the show, but, at the end of the day, do you really Trey Savage is a guy that's out there, right? That's a guy that maybe could, do a couple of things. But if I'm looking for upside, I do think I want to stick with a bat in the first round. And for me, Cam Smith is that guy. I would absolutely love for the Red Sox to get him. The contact skills with him are incredible. And there's a power upside there. And that's what the Red Sox like there when it comes to looking for a bat. So with Cam Smith, that's the guy I'm hoping for. Maybe you could land with the James Tibbs. Maybe, who knows? Advanced Honeycutt has been a guy that's popped up on mock drafts there. So we'll see how that goes. But Cam Smith is my pick for the Red Sox as of right now. For the Giants, that's another interesting one. We just talked about Nick Kurtz, right? Nick Kurtz is a guy that's been mocked to the Giants in a couple of mocks out there. For me, I do think they end up taking someone like a Cam Caminiti, where if you take a look when it comes to Caminiti and the scouting report, where he sets himself apart is he has a little bit more to offer when it comes to the pitch repertoire as of right now compared to someone like a William Schmidt, where William Schmidt has a massive curveball and good velocity, but Caminiti has a bit more range when it comes to what he can do on the mound. So for me, I think Caminiti on the pitching side of things has a ton of upside. Now, if Nick Kurtz falls there, or maybe even someone like a Conor Griffin, then yeah, I think the Giants should go there. But based off of the mock that I have, Caminiti seems to be the guy. They've been connected with him. We'll see how that ends up going. So, but Giants, for me, I say you just take the best available, like you always should. But that kind of gets me into the Cubs, right? Another guy that's been mentioned with the Cubs a couple of times in different mocks is Ryan Waldschmidt. Ryan Waldschmidt, I think, is a really underrated prospect. I think that's someone you need to keep an eye on in this draft, where very good contact ability, very good plate discipline, and has a good amount of pop as well, along with speed. Now, the one thing that holds him back is the defense a little bit. But to me, I think that's someone you really need to pay attention to in this draft. Waldschmidt, for me right now, I have going to the Cubs. I think the Cubs could go a couple of different ways here. I think you could do someone like a Trey Savage if he's there. I think that could make some sense. The Cubs, they have gone with college pitching over the last few years with a couple of their picks. So I could definitely see someone like that. If James Tibbs is available at that spot, I think that's someone that could land there as well. But for me, Ryan Waldschmidt, he gives me those Matt Shaw kind of vibes, or he's got that stocky build, a confident player, a guy that has a bit of a swagger out there. I would love that pick for the Cubs if it ends up going that route. But that's a team I think could go so many different ways. But moving on after that, I think the Mariners are also really interesting. The Seattle Mariners, now, when it comes to how they've been drafting lately, they've been going that high school route. They've been going, before that, they were going college pitching. So which way do they go here? Do they stick with the prep talent? Do they maybe focus back on some college pitching? Or, maybe you can go with a college hitter if that's available. Honestly, I think for the Mariners, I think you could make an argument if someone like Ryan Waldschmidt or Cam Smith is there, maybe that might be a good idea for the Mariners, to go with, get a bat into that system that's pretty advanced already. And we've seen how the Mariners offense has been over the last couple of years where they just can't really seem to get it going with the offense. So maybe you could plug in someone that's advanced like Waldschmidt if he's available there. Maybe someone like a Carson Bange, a good all-around hitter. So we'll see. I think the Mariners are really interesting. If they were to stick with that college pitching route, maybe Trey Savage is there. That's where I have it mocked right now. But if he's not there, maybe you could do a Jurangelo Sencha. That could be really interesting. He would be the next best college pitcher, unless you think Brody Brecht is that guy. We'll see. But I think with Senja, I think he's really interesting because he's the switch pitcher, right? Probably one of the more fun picks of the draft. I think there is a really intriguing upside there. He's going to be more of a righty. He's going to be, throwing a little bit from the left side, but not as much as he would be on the right side, where that could be something for the Mariners, right? We've seen how well they've done with these college pitchers like Logan Gilbert, like George Kirby, right? They've done very well with those guys. Do they stick with the strength, or do maybe they go with a college hitter, a guy that's a bit more advanced? Or, hey, just stick to what's been working the last couple of years. Keep shooting for the prep guys, right? Maybe someone like Conor Griffin could be there. I think that would be amazing if he was. Or maybe you can go with someone like a Theo Gillen. He's regarded as the next prep positional player. So I think the Mariners could be really fun. But moving on after that, you got the Marlins. In my mock draft, I had Christian Moore going to the Marlins. I wonder where he ends up going. He seems to be getting a lot of life near that top 10 or in the top 10. We've been seeing the Red Sox, getting those mocks lately. The Cubs have been getting mocked with him lately. We'll see. I've even seen, the Angels a couple of times here and there. So I think Christian Moore is really interesting. He had a monster of a season, huge College World Series. When you have those guys do that well in the College World Series, that really turns heads. But he also has good metrics to go along with it. He has a good amount of exit velocity. He's pretty decent with the chase rate, pretty decent with the contact percentage. So Christian Moore, look out for him. For me, I have him, I don't want to say falling. It feels like you could say he's falling at this point because he has so much helium at this point. I think if the Marlins were able to get him, I think they should take advantage of that. That's another team that really needs bats so desperately. They really need to get an impact bat into that system. If not him, maybe it could end up being Cam Smith if he falls there. Maybe Ryan Waldschmidt could be available. I think there's a good chance Waldschmidt could be available for the Marlins. I think when I have him with the Cubs, I think there's a bit of a reach, you could maybe say. I have a couple of hitters ahead of Ryan Waldschmidt at this point. So we'll see how that ends up going. But I think the Marlins are really interesting. Could they stick with, what they did last year? You went Noble Meyer last year. You also got Thomas White. Could they go for some more high school pitching? We'll see. Maybe, who knows, if Caminiti's sitting there, could you imagine Caminiti going there? I don't know. But 17, I have an interesting one. I have Vance Honeycutt going to the Brewers. Vance Honeycutt to me is a massive enigma in this draft. Vance Honeycutt has everything going for him. He has a plus on everything except for the hit tool. The hit tool is it's the only question mark at this point. With Vance Honeycutt, he chases a lot and he doesn't make a lot of contact. When he does make contact, it basically goes to freaking Jupiter. But with Honeycutt, he's one of those intriguing prospects here where if you just clean up that one thing, even if you clean it up just a little bit, you could end up getting a massive superstar on your hands. The Brewers, they like to go for those up the middle guys, whether it's, middle infield or, center fielders. The Brewers have done pretty well when it comes to drafting those positions. I think Honeycutt would be awesome there. He could very well fall a little bit lower than that too, but that's kind of where I'm thinking with the Brewers right now. I'm thinking college bats. I'm thinking, guys that can come up and, impact real quick. Again, I keep bringing up Waldschmidt. I think Waldschmidt can have a home anywhere in that 15 to 20 range, maybe even like 14, to the Cubs. I think that's very possible. But Brewers, I am definitely looking to see what they end up doing here. Maybe even someone like a Seaver King, right? Seaver King I have a little bit lower. I actually have Seaver King going in a couple of picks after this. But next up, I have the Rays, right? Getting Kellen Lindsey, right? Kellen Lindsey is definitely lower on the rankings. Very athletic prep shortstop. He's still, I don't want to say growing into the game of baseball, but he was big on football not too long ago, but he's fully committed to playing baseball now. But just the athleticism is off the charts. He has a 75 run tool. There's not really a whole lot of power there as of right now. The contact is okay at this point, but he's a guy that you basically stash away in your system, let him grow, let him do his thing in the minor leagues, really try to develop him. Sounds like something the Rays would do, but I think the Rays could go a couple of different ways here. Again, I bring up Waldschmidt, right? I think that is a guy, he's a guy that's pretty good with the metrics, pretty good with the advanced numbers there, makes a lot of contact. I think if Waldschmidt is there, I think you could go with him. I think Honeycutt, if he is there, I think you could easily go with him. There's, again, if you can just clean up that one thing, maybe the Rays could see some potential there. We'll see. But you never know with the Rays. They always do something weird, right? But that's where we get into the Mets. I got Seaver King going to the Mets. I think that's a guy where he could really go a bunch of different ways here. I think Seaver King, the athleticism is off the charts with him. Super utility guy, plays a bunch of different positions. That sounds like kind of a Met sort of a guy, especially with David Stearns there now, where you could really tap into some more of that potential. He's a college player, but has a good amount of that upside there. So we'll see how that goes. But I think the Mets, you could go a few different ways here. Maybe someone like Brody Brecht is there, maybe even Honeycutt again. I think the Mets, at the end of the day, they're going to really shoot for upside. Maybe they could stick with the high school ranks. We'll see how that ends up going. But this is where we get into, the 20 to 30 range, right? Where, you never know what could happen in this 20 to 30 range. Guys that I have, in this range, you got Walker Yannick here for me, at least. You got Malcolm Moore. I mentioned Brody Brecht. Got some high school pictures in this range. A couple of guys in the back half towards 30. I have some guys like Billy Amick coming off the board here. And then I got some high school players at the back, right? So I would say in this range, really look to high school pitching, really look for those guys to come off here. I also have Carson Bench going at number 23 to the Dodgers. I did have him falling here. A lot of mocks out there have teams taking him in that, middle, 10 to 20 range, somewhere in there. I've seen a lot of, Marlins connections there. I've seen, even the Mariners there, the Brewers. That team seems to be a popular home. I feel like those teams are going to go in a different way, because with Carson Bench, the one thing with him is he's just pretty good at everything. He doesn't necessarily have like that one thing that's really going to set him apart. Yes, he makes good contact. Yes, he has good exit velocities. Yes, he's pretty patient for the most part at the plate. When it comes to the field, he's going to, give you some decent speed. He's going to give you a decent glove. He does have a good arm. That is one thing with Carson Bench. He's going to give you a pretty decent arm. Some scouts think, maybe he can play some center field. He seems to be more of a corner guy. So that's where I just wonder, because he's kind of just pretty good at everything, I wonder if that ends up kind of pushing him down. Not necessarily a knock on him, but it's more where teams are kind of looking at other tools with other players where they see maybe a bit more upside, where Bench, in my opinion, is a bit more of a floor kind of a guy. So I end up having him falling to the Dodgers, and the Dodgers, they don't have another pick until near, number 100, for crying out loud. So I think if they were to end up getting someone like him, I think that would be amazing if he could fall there. I definitely think he could go, Twins, Orioles. The Orioles are so big on taking these college bats. I could definitely see him going there. We'll see. Got a couple of catchers in this realm of the draft. Walker Yannick I have going to the Blue Jays. I feel like they could really use some catching in that system. I like Yannick. I think he really showed what he could do this past year. He put up some really good numbers this past year at Sam Houston State, but he's good defensively. I think that's what sets him apart, at least in my opinion, where you have someone like a Malcolm Malcolm Moore, who has a pretty good bat from the left side, pretty good advanced metrics there as well. Walker Yannick, he's not going to be as flashy with the metrics, but he's going to give you pretty good defense overall at catcher, and that's so valuable. I could see the Blue Jays, maybe even the Twins taking that route. We'll see. But again, kind of getting back to the back half of this part of the draft, I see some high school pitching. You got guys like Cash Mayfield, Ryan Sloan, William Schmidt. I think those guys have a very good chance of coming off in the back half. We'll see how that ends up going. A couple of college guys, that aren't as higher as, obviously some of these other guys, guys like Billy Amick, Dakota Jordan. Those are a couple of guys to really pay attention to in the back half, because they, Billy Amick, he has that raw power, or maybe you could even get a bit more out of him. And Dakota Jordan is just an uber athlete. We'll see what ends up happening with him. Not the best hit tool with Dakota Jordan, but a guy that's super fast. A lot of raw power there. So yeah, there's, if you're looking for upside, if you're looking for future potential, Dakota Jordan could definitely be a guy, we'll see. But there's a whole lot of ways, this draft could end up going. I'm very, very excited for it. But everyone, I am going to wrap it up here. I think we're pretty much covered it. Didn't want to go too long for tonight. Just kind of want to do a quick preview for the most part, and just get Joe Doyle here on the show. But everyone, I'm going to wrap it up there. If you can on the way out, hit that like button for me. It really does help get this out into the algorithm for the replay viewers. Really does help. But everyone that stopped by tonight, just want to say thank you. Thank you to the moderators for coming out. Thank you for everyone that just chimed in the chat. I see you guys. But everyone, make sure you come on out Sunday for the watch party. We're going to watch the draft together. We're going to react to every single pick. It's going to be a good time. But everyone, go have yourself a good rest of your night. Again, thank you for stopping by, and I'll talk to you next time.